Hello and welcome to another video. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to make 130 breaks in the style of Mani Festo, inspired by his tracks Continuum, Eraser, Disengage, and Close Proximity. The project file, samples, and presets are available for a small contribution in the description, although the vocal sample is from Freesound, so it's linked below for free. If you're not subscribed, consider doing so, and if you learned something from this video, then drop a like. If you like this style, then check out my breaks and jungle playlist, which I'll link on the screen and in the description. As always, you can suggest other artists, styles, or labels you'd like me to cover in the comments. Our BPM is 134 and we are in the key of E minor. Let's start with the kick. Here we have a drum machine kick, layered with the kick from the worm break. I cut the bass from the sample before I brought it into the project. And this is how they sound together in the mix. On the group, there's drum bus using the hard algorithm with transient shaping and compression, although this is in parallel. Then we have an EQ, and I've removed the frequencies below the fundamental of the drum machine kick. Next, we have the drums group, starting with the breaks. I've been pretty maximalist with the layering for the drums here. If I remove some breakbeat elements, you can hear what they add. So we have a think break snare, parts of the worm break, and an amen snare. I've added echo to the amen snare, and we can see some rolls if we look at the MIDI. There's this snare clap. Then we have ghost notes from the think break, and I've added a slapback delay, a technique which is inspired by the breaks in Continuum, although I've gone for a more subtle effect. Next, we have a think break tambourine and a break hat from the amen break. And an amen break fill. We also have this noise. Layering noise with breakbeats can help add texture and dirt, as well as gluing different breaks together once processing is added. So here the breaks group is actually sidechaining the noise. Then we have the electronic percussion. I'll solo these individually. So we have a clap, the first close hat, and a busy shaker pattern. Then we have the hats. So we have a closed hat and a ride in a drum rack and choke group. And if we look at the MIDI, we can see I've done the housey thing with the hat being a 16th triplet note before the ride. I've applied this two-step groove to all the elements in the drums group. I was going to use a pattern with less swing, but this groove worked well when I tried it out, so I just ran with it. On the drums group, we have saturation and a glue compressor. Then we have an EQ, which is removing low frequencies. And I've scooped out the mid-range, which is sort of a 90s style EQ technique. Reverb is applied via Sende. And I'm using the hybrid reverb on convolution only mode. I've chosen this bunker impulse response. So a small space with hard surfaces, similar to a club environment. Next, we have the bass. Like in Continuum, we have a simple one-note pattern. This is an FM patch made in Serum. All three oscillators are active. The sub-oscillator is a sine wave taken down by 2 octaves. Oscillator A is another sine wave, also taken down by 2 octaves. But here the unison has been turned to 7, and FM from B is active. Oscillator B is another sine wave, this time taken down by an octave, and again with the unison at 7. This time the level has been taken down, so we only get the effects of the FM. Oscillator A and the sub are running into this low pass filter, which has its cutoff modulated bidirectionally by LFO2. LFO1 is modulating the master tuning, creating a subtle pitch drop. We have distortion in the effects, and I'm using the filter within the distortion on post mode, and I've taken it down as I didn't want the higher harmonics created by the distortion to come through. On the channel, there's bass mono up to 500 Hertz, parallel compression, similar to what we had with the drums, and EQ. Again, scooping, and I removed the fundamental of the kick so the bass and kick don't clash. Reverb is applied via A. Next, we have the effects. First, we have this zap group. And the first layer here is this big laser. And the second is this fluffy zap. The fluffy zap is a wavetable preset from Ableton's core library. On the group here, we have an echo. Next, we have the beep, which is inspired by some of the more modular sounding bleepy effects heard in tracks like Eraser and Disengage. These sounds aren't as prevalent in Continuum, which is the main inspiration for this project, but I would emphasize the importance of these ear candy type sounds if you're looking to take inspiration from Mani Festo's music. On the channel, we have Erosion to add some high-end grit. Then, like the zap group, we have an echo. Next, we have this jungly riser reverse. For this sound, we have an auto filter with the LFO active, and this is sweeping the filter around. Then we have erosion, EQ, Serum effects with phaser, and an echo. Finally, we have the reverse. Here we have erosion and echo on the channel. On the effects group, we have serum effects with distortion, which is compressing the dry sounds and echoes together, and a long reverb. Then we have some compression type processing, and this helps further elongate the echo and reverb tails. Finally, we have an EQ and reverb via A. Next, we have the melodic group. Starting with the piano. This is a simple pattern inspired by Continuum. I've used Ableton's stock grand piano here, and we have a saturator. I've used isotope vinyl, which is on all the melodic elements in this group in some form. And I use the warp feature, which creates this warbly pitching effect. It's not super evident on this sound, but it will be with the pads. Then we have EQ, echo, and serum effects. And again, here we have distortion and reverb, like with the previous group. Then we have the main pad. For the chords, the first is E minor 7, then G major 9, another G major 9, but with a couple of the higher notes removed, and a D in the bass, and a D7 sus4. My theory isn't great, so if I've got these chords wrong, then leave a comment correcting me and I'll pin it. The progression is, of course, inspired by Continuum. In Serum, we have a saw wave with its unison at 7, and we can see the FM from B knob is activated with its amount modulated by LFO1, and I'm using a slow rate for the modulation. Oscillator B, which is the carrier waveform with its level turned down, is a sine wave with its unison again at 7. We've also got some subtle microcorg noise provided by the sample player. Both A and the noise are running into this low pass filter with its cutoff turned up, plus drive and fat, and the mix has been taken down a little. In the effects, we have distortion with the internal filter taken down. Then we have EQ, again with the scoop, another filter where I'm using resonance and drive to shape the sound a little, and reverb. As I alluded to previously, iZotope's vinyl warp effect is kind of the secret sauce for these types of pad sounds. Again, relatively subtle, but it definitely makes the pad sound more 90s, almost like it's a sample. Finally, we have EQ, and there's an auto filter, which is sweeping the frequencies around a little using the built-in LFO. Next, we have the high synth group. The string sounds are inspired by Disengage, although Mani Festo uses them in a more menacing way, whereas in my project, they add high-end shimmer to the main pad. First, we have the synth string. This is a droning root note. I've used a patch very similar to the main pad, with the only significant difference being that this filter's cutoff is higher. The effects are very similar. On the channel, we have an EQ. Next, we have the sampled string, and it's another drone. On the channel, we have serum effects with hyperdimension and distortion. And finally, an EQ. This sample helps to thicken the high mids, as well as adding a real sampled instrument alongside the synthesizers. Finally, we have the vocal pad, and this is another sample. On the channel, we have EQ and more serum effects. And for this sound, we've got hyperdimension, distortion, and phaser. These last two sounds are pretty subtle, but they do help add movement and shimmer to the project. On the high synths group, I've added isotope vinyl and an auto filter, which is removing harshness. Finally, on the melodic group, we have a mono utility up to 500 Hz. Some of these sounds are very wide, and monocompatibility should always be a concern for club tracks. Then we have a saturator and glue compressor, like the other groups. Plus EQ and reverb via A. Finally, we have the vocal. As I mentioned in the intro, this is available for free via Freesound. I've used Max's Granulator 2 for the vocal. This works well around bar 5 particularly, as the granulator repeatedly re-triggers the sample, almost like a delay. On the channel, we have isotope vinyl, drum bus with damping, echo with high feedback, serum effects, reverb, and EQ. Reverb is applied via A. And that's the video. Please leave any questions in the comments, and thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.